The easiest way to think of track mats is to think of them as stencils or cookie cutters. You can use the transparency of one layer to determine the transparency of another. So to show you what I mean, let's go down to the bottom of the timeline panel and the second button from the left in the lower left corner. Make sure that's enabled. That'll enable our modes in our track mat. Notice layer 1 doesn't have an option for track mat. That's because track mats need to reference the layer above in order to enable a track mat. So for example, let's select layer 3. I want to use the transparency of layer 2, which is this circle, to determine exactly how much of layer 3 I would like to see. So if you go to the track mat pull down for layer 3, click on the word None and choose Alpha Matte. With Alpha Matte, it's looking at the alpha transparency of layer 2. Now there are a couple of other track mat options. Let's look at alpha inverted. Of course, just does the exact inverse. Now layermatte is interesting because it looks at the brightness values of the image above. Let's enable layermatte. As you can see, anything that was white is now completely bright and allowing me to show the background layer. Anything that wasn't white is now just a varying shade of grey underneath in terms of its transparency. So if I turn Luma back to alpha, you can see the entire thing. When you go to Luma, it's just using the brightness values. So let's switch our track mat back to alpha, and I want to stress something. When you're using track mats, the two layers are working together to determine the image of the composition. They're not tied together when you want to go animate. So for example, if we select layer 2, I can click in the composition and drag and move layer 2 around, and no matter where I move it, it's going to go ahead and cut out the background and reveal anything underneath of this alpha channel. The same goes for the background layer. I'm just going to press Command Z to make sure my circle's back at the beginning, and then I'll select my background layer. Now if I click and drag around, notice I can move the background behind the map. If I move it too high, the egg shows through, because again the matte is not moving with the fill. So layer 3 is the fill and layer 2 is the matte. Now you may have missed this, but when the track mat was enabled from layer 3, the visibility for layer 2 was turned off. And a lot of times when I apply layer masks, I still end up retaining some of the color information from the layer that I'm using as the mask. So in order to introduce color back into a grassy background, I'm going to go ahead and select layer 2 and press Command D on the mat, or Control D on Windows to duplicate the layer. Now let's turn the visibility of layer 2 back on and to blend it into the background. We'll go into our modes pull down and change the layer from normal to hard light. Now this is mixing into the background. I can still see a little bit of it, but the colors are blending in and this looks a little bit more interesting. I'd like to pop the H off the background, so I'm going to go ahead and select layer 1. And just right click and choose Layer Styles Drop Shadow. There, that gives it a little bit more dimension. Now if you want to add the grass back into the scene, we can do that. But before I do it, I just want to show you the alpha transparency for this composition. If you go to the channel button in the middle of the comp, that looks red, green and blue. Go ahead and click on that. Then choose alpha, and here you can see I have a perfect map for this. I could render this out with alpha transparency and drop it over any video footage I wanted. But like I said, I want to add the grass back, and so I'm going to change my channel viewing back to RGB and select layer 4. Now before we duplicate this layer, I want to draw your attention to the fact that alpha has been applied to its track mat. So press Command D or Control D on Windows and you'll notice that the layer automatically jumps above its alpha layer. So I want to disable the alpha channel for layer 3. I'm going to change it from alpha to no matte. Now just for the sake of my own organization, I like to actually drag that type of background all the way to the bottom layer hierarchy. And to continue to give it a little bit more separation, I'm going to go up under Effect and choose Blur. Fast Blur. And we'll just click and drag onto the blurriness setting there. So now you can see exactly what you can do when it comes to adding track mats and working with blend modes. You can take your graphics from blah to hey, and that's kind of interesting.